I hate to say it, but I think Kellen Moore just dropped another hint about Kirby Moore.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And of course, we got to talk about Missouri's big-time matchup at home in basketball against Texas A&M later in the show. And you know what? I really genuinely hope Luther Burden falls in the NFL draft. Not because I dislike him, actually quite the opposite. Before we get there, I do want to remind you that, yes, indeed, as you can tell by my attire, Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play even more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. So, how about another Kirby Moore update? You guys ready for it? Well, this will probably be the last one until post-Super Bowl on Monday. Hopefully by Monday or Tuesday, this whole speculation will be over. And I have to admit, I've probably been the biggest speculator out there in the market on this particular topic. So if I end up looking stupid here, well, I'm used to it after calling Zakai Ziegler overrated this week. But I will say this, my colleague Ross Jackson over at Locked On Saints, well, nobody knows the New Orleans Saints better than Ross Jackson, in my opinion, and he sent me a link yesterday on a piece he wrote for LouisianaSports.net. Of course, as a New Orleans guy, he's down there covering the Super Bowl locally, and naturally, he's interested in Kellen Moore, who is the presumed next coach of your New Orleans Saints, too. So during his media availability yesterday, Kellen Moore, I'll just read to you from Ross's piece here. It says, quote, when asked about his younger brother coordinator, that of course being Kellen Moore, being asked about Missouri offensive coordinator Kirby Moore, he praised his brother's impact in helping to turn the SEC team around, but ended his compliment with a bit of an allusion. Quote, he's done an awesome job. I mean, they've had double-digit wins the last 2 years to turn that thing around, play at a really high level on offense. I know he's going to have a lot of really good opportunities, very shortly for himself. And as Ross continues here, very shortly, he emphasizes, may not be tongue-in-cheek. Kellen Moore is expected to become the New Orleans Saints head coach very soon after the Super Bowl is wrapped up in New Orleans this week. So obviously my colleague there, Ross Jackson, taking note of Kellen Moore's tone, which for the second time this week, I thought was a little bit smirky, maybe a little again, tongue-in-cheek, whatever it was. That was the second time that he basically used that same phrase. Hey, he's going to have some opportunities for himself very soon, very shortly, that type of thing. That really seems like an allusion to, hey, guys, I want to be hiring my brother to be either my offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach, whatever it might be. So I do think this, to me, the first time I was able to maybe go, well, maybe he's just saying, hey, love my brother, he's going to have some opportunities. The fact that he said it now for a second time with the Super Bowl media this week, boy, that's causing me to pause. My original take was I didn't think the New Orleans Saints were going to pay up for what it's going to take to get Kirby Moore away from Missouri, who's scheduled to make about $1.3 million next season. But quite honestly, the coordinator market has been reset. As I said earlier in the week, Chip Kelly, who was with the Ohio State Buckeyes for this past season, is now going to be making $6 million a year reportedly with the Las Vegas Raiders. And that is about twice as much as what the highest paid offensive coordinators made in the NFL this past season. I believe Kellen Moore was third in the league with the Eagles, making $2.5 million a season. So with the market being reset there, well, that tells me that New Orleans is almost certainly going to have to be more competitive with their money, no matter who they hire at offensive coordinator. So all of this is to say, I've been under the assumption that Kirby Moore is going to come back. Obviously, if you're an everyday listener, you know that was my original take. But as the facts and information changes on the ground, I think a lot of times you have to change with it. And right now, my confidence in Kirby Moore coming back to Missouri next season are dramatically lower, to say the least. In fact, if you're going to make me bet, I'm kind of betting now that I think Kirby's going to follow Kellen. Again, this second sort of allusion to, hey, very soon he's going to have some good opportunities. Nudge, nudge, hint, hint, wink, wink. Know what I mean? I just don't think that's a coincidence a second time around. That seems more like a pattern to me. Now, of course, we got to go a little big brain here. We got to go a little 4D chess as well, because, of course, Kirby Moore could easily kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge his brother as well and go, hey, you know what would be nice? If you put it out there that you might hire me as an offensive coordinator, that way I could get, yes, more money from the Missouri Tigers, who, quite honestly, if it does come to that, if it comes down to, hey, how much do we really want Kirby Moore? Well, that then becomes the question. Is he, obviously the Tigers would love to keep him around for the price they currently have him, $1.3 million. What about $2 million? I think that's when it gets interesting, because clearly a couple seasons ago, Missouri was willing to go at least $2 million. I think a little bit more, maybe 2.1, 2.2 for Blake Baker, the former Missouri defensive coordinator, who eventually got about $2.5 million from LSU. So again, big brain, 4D chess kind of stuff here. Well, if you're Kirby Moore, you might be thinking, wait a second, if they were willing to give Blake Baker after a couple good seasons that kind of money, maybe they'll give it to me too. So if you're on the optimistic side, maybe this just is an agent behind the scenes ploy for a raise, that kind of thing. I'm genuinely not 100% sure of what to make of it, of course. But I know this. Once again, my confidence that Kirby Moore is going to be back next season is certainly dramatically lower than it was earlier this week. And for those of you watching the program, if you're curious, this number 19 Chiefs jersey, no, it's not for Joe Montana. No, it's not even for Kadarius Toney. Come on, you know who it is. You see that? You see that? Come on, can I twist far enough? There we go. Yes, Jeremy Maclin, in my opinion, the greatest wide receiver in the history of Missouri football, and a Kansas City Chief as well. But you know what? Coming up on the program, we got to talk some hoops, obviously. By the way, how can Texas A&M have the 32nd best offense in the country, and yet they're 284th in effective field goal percentage? Well, Buzz and the Aggies are nothing if not a contradiction. So let's talk about that game and why I'm picking, yes, Missouri to win another home game coming up in just a little bit. But first, PrizePicks, the best place to play daily fantasy, especially with the big game almost here. And here's how it works. You simply pick more or less on at least 2-player projections. And if you're right, you could win some big bucks. For example, take Travis Kelce. If you think he's going to have a big game, take him for more on his receiving projections. And maybe if you think that affects another Chiefs receiver, maybe Xavier Worthy, for example, gets a little bit less action. Because of that, you can go less on Xavier Worthy as well. You see, I like the things that correlate. But download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. It is PrizePicks. Run your game. So while the Texas A&M Aggies are one of the worst high major teams at actually making shots efficiently, well, they're still very much above average in getting the ball into the basket. And if that sounds like a bizarre contradiction, well, allow me to explain, because even though the Aggies aren't the most efficient shooting team in the world, well, they crash the boards to the tune of the best offensive rebounding team in the entire country. And, of course, they get to the free throw line. And I say, of course, because if you've paid attention to A&M or in recent years or just Buzz Williams, his career in general, well, this is very much the usual Buzz Williams formula. Again, not exactly necessarily a pretty thing to watch at all times, but effective enough for his teams to usually make the big dance and sometimes at least, I don't know, a couple games or two in there. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, the obvious part of the equation, the other half, is that Texas A&M also defends as well. They're one of the best defensive teams in the entire country. And yet, no disrespect to the Aggies, but I'm going to pick the Tigers at home until I'm proven wrong at this point. That's how confident I feel about Missouri in Mizzou Arena right now. I also think this is a good spot to pick the Tigers, at least I would think, coming off of a loss on the road. I just think this team is going to be ready to keep itself on the right side of the standings, because if Missouri were to lose to Texas A&M here, well, in the SEC standings, suddenly you're kind of in a jumbled mess there in the middle of the league, whereas you hold serve here at home, you're still sitting solidly in third place and looking like a double bye is, well, you're kind of in the driver's seat for it. Let's put it that way. And another reason I'm confident in the Tigers as well, I love their veteran leadership on this ball club, particularly Tamar Bates. I've just noticed in recent games, especially on the road in Tennessee, I would describe his leadership style as aggressively positive. And what I mean by that is he's out there barking and, clapping his hands really loudly when he feels like something good has happened out there on the ball court. But even if the result wasn't positive, maybe it was a foul by Missouri or something like that, and even he's still out there, in baseball, a lot of times a pitch will be perfectly timed, but just, you got slightly under it. You fouled it straight back to the screen, that type of thing. And, your coach will go, good rip, son, that type of deal. Well, my point is Tamar Bates seems like the king of good rip, just keeping it positive all the time and in a very aggressive way. And what I mean by that is he's not just letting his teammates know that he's liking what he sees and believes in them. To me, he's letting the entire arena, the opponents, everybody know that's exactly how he feels. That's excellent leadership, in my opinion. Now, I will say this, it's not just football where I think scheduling suffers in the 16-team, beyond 16, of course, even when it's 14 teams, that type of deal. Even the old Big 12, of course, too, this had the same problem, but even more so the bigger you get. Would it not have been fun to see Tennessee again in Columbia? Now, don't get me wrong. I don't wish that for Kansas this season. I didn't want to go back to Allen Fieldhouse. Let's just keep that Columbia victory in our pockets. But for real, that is why the Kansas rivalry, for as fun as that game was, as great as that victory was, and as satisfying as it all was, that's why the rivalry with the Jayhawks is never going to be quite the same. Not only the actual conference battle and standings, but the annual, the twofer, the home and away series in Columbia, in Lawrence, every season. Hey, it's not, again, my point here is not to really talk about the Kansas rivalry so much. It's more about how, even without these traditional rivalries, Missouri and Tennessee is not a traditional rivalry, but boy, it would have felt like one this season, a return game to Columbia in the conference. Again, that's how you build those type of rivalries and that type of history between basketball teams. I think that's something that's really, really lost in modern college basketball, is the lack of home and away matchups. It's basically we've got Vanderbilt and Arkansas and usually one of the Mississippi teams. I believe Ole Miss is our usual partner there. I don't exactly. I think it's Oklahoma this year now that I think about it. In fact, I'm quite certain that it is now that I've reminded myself in real time here. But regardless, I just think that's something that's really lost here. If Missouri was playing Auburn twice, imagine if Auburn was coming back. You'd want some revenge. You'd feel like you could get some revenge. And then at the same time, if Auburn were to come in and win in Columbia again, beat us twice, what a statement that would be for them as well. To me, it's just much more interesting from a basketball standpoint, from a storyline standpoint, when you have those return matchups. Again, in boxing, if every time, hey, Ali Frazier won, well, that was it. See you later, everybody. We're not doing that again. Who would want that? No, I want to see that again. That was tremendous. Again, that's something basketball's losing a little bit right now. And if you think Missouri is playing its best basketball right now, well, Dennis Gates definitely agrees with you, and he thinks the Tigers can play even better. Well, if that's the case, holy cow, as Jordan said, the ceiling really is the roof, because last month, according to Brett Torvik and his efficiency ratings, well, the Tigers, since they lost to Auburn on January 4th, so this includes the victory over LSU on the 7th and everything since, including a couple losses to Tennessee and Texas on the road. Well, Missouri, the second best team in the country by his numbers, second only to Houston, and one spot ahead of the Auburn Tigers, by the way. Not too shabby. So if your eyes have been telling you that Missouri truly has been one of the elite teams in college basketball for the last month or so, hey, you are totally correct. And the good news is, if you're a Missouri fan, that Tennessee game on the road, that was the toughest game left on Missouri's schedule, and the Tigers hung in there admirably, I thought. If you want to be disappointed by the loss, I understand. I'm just saying, projecting forward, I think that's actually a positive sign. Plus, you think about it, obviously the Aggies, we've been talking about, they're coming to Mizzou Arena on Saturday with other home games against Oklahoma, Bama, South Carolina, and Kentucky. And then road games, Georgia, Arkansas, Vanderbilt, and also Oklahoma. Those are 4 winnable games on the road. So while you've heard me say, hey, I think the Tigers have a really good chance to go undefeated, you've got 4 winnable, none of them easy, by the way, but 4 winnable road games. Again, a favorable schedule down the stretch here for the Tigers, but still not easy. Does that sound familiar? Almost like the Mizzou football schedules of 24 and 25 coming up. And it seems the word of the day on Locked On Mizzou is contradictions. Well, how about another one for you? I love Luther Burden, but I hope he falls in the NFL draft. I'll explain, but first, yes, Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. And I got to tell you, I still like Patrick Mahomes, your Super Bowl MVP, plus 110. That's a simple bet. Let's get a little more complicated, though. If I like Missouri against Texas A&M at home, well, why don't we parlay that? You know what? Let's actually pull up the odds here really quick at FanDuel Sportsbook and actually check that. Let's not do that because the Missouri odds are not up yet. But regardless, Missouri's going to be a money line favorite. So if you parlay that with the Kansas City Chiefs, who are also a slight money line favorite, hey, I bet you're going to get some odds then. There's your John Miller special parlay for you. But regardless of what you're into, you got to go to FanDuel knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl. Well, that's the icing on the cake. So download the app and head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, again, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Well, I've seen some NFL mock drafts that have Luther Burden going as high as number 12 to the Dallas Cowboys. But the most recent mock draft I saw from CBSSports.com actually had Missouri tackle Armand Mimbu going 12th overall to the Dallas Cowboys. So, man, what odds would you have gotten just a couple of months ago that Mimbu would go higher than Burden in the NFL draft? Looking quite possible at the moment. And really, that's not based on any huge dings for Burden or anything like that. Mimbu, just one of the big risers of the NFL draft over the last couple of months or so. But regardless, It does seem like maybe Burden could be sliding a little bit farther back, maybe back half of the second round, that type of deal versus the top half, which is something I had frankly speculated on a little bit at the end of the season. But here's the deal. You look at the top half of the NFL draft, and what do you see? Well, obviously you see a lot of bad teams for the most part. Now, if Burden did end up in Dallas, that would actually be a pretty good landing spot. Dak Prescott, you got a real quarterback there. CeeDee Lamb obviously is there to take tons of pressure off of Burden. In fact, really it'd be Burden hopefully taking pressure off of CeeDee Lamb in a perfect world. I actually like those two together. Think their skill sets fit pretty well. By the way, in this CBS Sports Draft, Burden going 21st to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Hey, love the Steelers as an organization. Don't know that I love their quarterback situation, of course. But before them, the Cincinnati Bengals are drafting. How about Luther Burden at Cincinnati, 17th, playing with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins? Listen, I think Cincinnati obviously more likely to go defense at that spot, one would think. But holy cow, would that be an exciting spot for Luther Burden to go? How about the St. Louis Rams maybe at 26? Cooper Kupp looking like he's on his way out of Los Angeles. And honestly, Cooper Kupp is a guy that I think is a model for Luther Burden. Don't get me wrong. I think right now in college, I don't think Burden was a Cooper Kupp type of player, but I do think in the next level, I think there's more there with Burden in terms of his route tree and just route running ability in general. Just a similarly sized guy who's really athletic, plays the slot a lot. You know, Burden thought of as more of a yards after catch guy. And while Kupp is obviously more of a precision guy, a veteran guy at this point, again, I think that's something that Burden can add to his game over time. So, hey, maybe he'd be an interesting guy in the slot for the Los Angeles Rams at 26. Obviously, you could do a heck of a lot worse than having Sean McVay as your coach and play caller. And finally, what if he really falls low? Let's get crazy here. Hey, it is the NFL draft. Anything is possible. What if he fell all the way to 31 or 32, depending on if the Chiefs win or not? What if that happens? Or even the Philadelphia Eagles, for that matter. That'd be a heck of a 1-2-3 combination. A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and Luther Burden. Holy cow, who would want to match up with that? Well, from the Chiefs' perspective, as exciting as that would seem, it doesn't really seem like a Chiefs-like move at this point. They just signed Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, a late first-round pick last year, and Rashee Rice expected to come back and be a big contributor after a knee injury this season. Really, I feel like Burden is, in his skill set, he's almost a little bit too similar to Rashee Rice. And Xavier Worthy, well, I wouldn't necessarily compare those two, compare Worthy and Burden. Well, Worthy, like Burden, a little bit on the short-ish side, especially Worthy. He's definitely on the smallish side. But Burden, you know, he's what, 6'1", something like that. It's not like he's DeAndre Hopkins just jumping over dudes and winning every contested catch or anything like that. So I do think maybe Bird would be a little bit redundant with the Kansas City Chiefs. I will say that. And by the way, just quickly here, since I'm talking about the Chiefs, well, I got just some quick Super Bowl thoughts. I will pick Kansas City to win the ball game. I can't say I'm extremely confident or anything like that, considering the last time these two teams played in the Super Bowl. Well, I thought Jalen Hurts probably played the best game I've ever seen him play. So what does Philadelphia have against Spagnuolo, the Chiefs defense? I'm not really sure, and especially considering Saquon Barkley, you add him to that equation too. That's a scary, talented team, without a doubt. So, and yet, I'm still sticking with Andy Reid, with Patrick Mahomes, with Travis Kelce, that whole infrastructure. Hey, we'll see. I could totally be wrong. Can't complain as a Chiefs fan at this point, I'll promise you that. It's kind of nice to just be relaxed heading into a Super Bowl Sunday. Although, a three-peat, make some history, come on, let's do it. Anyway, regardless, thanks for joining me here on Locked On Mizzou, as always. And for your next listen, check out Locked On SEC on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts as well. So until next time, that'll be post-game following Texas A&M and Missouri. I'll see you right here on Locked On Mizzou.